we'll talk about mostly is how the giving of the Torah changes the relationship between confidence, active and passive.
What page is that?
So it's on page 106, but I didn't translate it yet. It's one of the parts I didn't translate originally.
You could read it and translate.
Yeah.
That's what Effie has did for all of
Right.
Perek Avodas Hashem quite successfully.
Page is that?
106.
106.
But we have to take the sheet.
But I also gave you a translation of Perek Avodas Hashem. Why he's not using it?
Well, but he did. He went and he read each line and translated. It was very helpful.
Okay.
So 106 or 105?
106.
Well, it's that.
Or Perek base. the
Right.
second page.
You're saying how giving the Torah translates,
It
changes,
changes.
from
It changes.
passive to active
Right.
confidence?
How did you know it was from passive to active? Did I say
What?
that?
You just said, I intuited.
You intuited, I think. So when Am Yisrael was in Egypt, so they were passive observers for the whole process of getting out of Egypt, and only Moshe Rabbeinu, and once in a while with Aaron's help, did everything that needed to be done in order to get the people out.
Then they did the whole thing with the sheep, and that was active for taking the sheep.
Yeah, but that didn't relate to their getting out. That was a beginning, like we'll see, of teaching them to do mitzvahs. And there was a reason why he started with that, but that wasn't part of the process of freeing the people. Not in relation to Egypt anyway. It freed them in their minds, but it wasn't yet facing their oppressors. The sages say something important about it. They say that with every makkah, with every plague that the Egyptians received, the people were healed a little bit. Nagof leMitzrayim v'rapo leYisrael. It's a pasuk in the prophets. So with every, meaning in a certain sense, this is something we talk about a lot, that you can't uplift somebody who's downtrodden without in some sense them seeing that the oppressor loses his strength. There has to be a feeling that whoever oppressed me is less and less, has less and less power over me. It's a process. And if you go through the process properly, then you're freed from the oppressor. So if a person was abused by adults when they were young, by parents, for instance, so they have to go through a process of seeing the parents losing their strength over them, some of the power, then more is transferred to the oppressed. So every plague which caused them to lose their hold over the people, it caused the people to become stronger, until eventually they couldn't face them yet, but they could at least do something that was, as I call it, at least contentious at some level. That they had to take the sheep and tie it to the bedpost. So it created some kind of tension with an ability to face their oppressors, not about being oppressed, but at least that I can do something and not be afraid of doing it in front of you. But they remain still passive. Those are levels, you could say, of passivity, of still being passive, not doing anything to actually save yourself from the oppressor. Moshe Rabbeinu was doing all the work. He was the one who was bringing the plagues upon Egypt in order to free the people from Egypt. and he uses Aaron in the background. Now, the reason we mention this is because Moshe and Aaron, they're the souls, they're the essential souls of victory and confidence, of Netzach and Hod. Moshe is Netzach, and Aaron is Hod. And so they themselves represent active and passive confidence. And Moshe Rabbeinu is the active confidence in all of reality. So when Moshe Rabbeinu brings the people out, basically he's doing everything himself. And the last conflict, which is at the Red Sea, is also entirely Moshe Rabbeinu. And Hashem says to him, tell the people not to fight, not to even say a word. Atem tacharishun, which is don't even daven, don't even pray. Why? So there is a very, very strong element here of being completely passive. Passive, mamish, like Chizkiyahu, who can only go to sleep. And indeed, in the middle of the night, the sea splits and the people cross it. And Hashem finishes everything off. So we have Nachshon as a medrash, but in the Pshat, there was a very strong element here of being passive. In a certain sense, you could say this was the height of the passivity, of being passive in this whole situation with Egypt. But then, once you finish with the Red Sea, then there's suddenly a complete change. And now there's an expectation that the people begin to become active.
They have to sing.
So they sing, but that's also Moshe leading them. There he's really seen as the conductor, as we talked about a few weeks ago. But they begin to walk, and there's all kinds of hardships on the way. And there's a certain expectation that they should be able to handle these hardships and not fall.
When they begin to walk into the sea?
Into
or
the desert.
afterwards?
Into the desert. So the first place they come to is a place that doesn't have any water, right, for them to drink. And they begin to heal. But the ultimate part of the healing happens at the giving of the Torah. That once Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to Hashem and he receives the Torah, so the Torah is now not going to be satisfied with the people in general doing something. It has to be every single individual. And we've talked about this, that this is a big switch, especially when you compare it to anything else that was going on 3,500 years ago in the world, that suddenly God has an expectation from you as an individual. That was unheard of back then. Everything in the world back then was non-individualistic. Everything was empires. And in an empire, you're just a person who's not of any value. You're really just a slave in the end. And even if the emperor takes you out and he says you're going to be responsible for so and so, it's an act that has nothing to do with what you did or didn't do. It's not like you did something special. You're sort of like picked out of the crowd for no apparent reason except for the emperor wanting you, and suddenly you receive some kind of responsibility. And the Torah comes and switches that entirely. And it says, from now on, Hashem is talking to you as an individual.
Whenever I hear about the counting, the counting, okay, we're counting for individuals, but now it sounds mind-blowing,
Okay?
the counting of the individuals.
When you understand what a revolution in human consciousness that was.
Wow.
But here it's not just an emperor telling you, I need you personally, I don't care who you are and what you've done. It's the creator of the entire universe. So, like, when you think about what a mitzvah is in that sense, it's the ultimate thing that gives you meaning as an individual. Obviously, there's mitzvot that we perform as a community, but the fact that there are individual mitzvot is just incredible. So people will come and argue how much of the communal was followed, how much of the individual was followed. In any case, it doesn't really matter, because the very fact that the Torah says, or that it begins with the singular Anochi, right? Which we talked about a lot in previous weeks. That I am Hashem, your God, not in the plural, Elokecha, right? Your God, in the singular. So that changes the whole picture, and he begins to say that Hashem needs you. He has a direct relationship with you as an individual, maybe not direct, but he has a relationship with you as an individual. The direct indirect part is not so easy to figure out, because Moshe Rabbeinu definitely is in the middle. But in the end, it goes down to you, and you have individual responsibility. And when you talk about individual responsibility, then you have to begin to talk about that this individual responsibility is active. It involves and it requires your active involvement, and not just your passive involvement. You can be involved also passively in the community, but when you talk about the individual, it's very hard to say, I'm commanding you to put tefillin on, and you don't go the distance to make sure and ensure that you have tefillin. Nobody's going to do it for you. On the other hand, for instance, there are things that are half communal and half individual. For instance, if a person is not circumcised, so the community has a duty to do it for them. So in certain things you can be passive. Or if a firstborn was not nifideh, how do you say? It wasn't redeemed. So the Beis Din the community has a responsibility to do it for them. But still, it's only if they don't do it. If they're not willing to do it or don't have the means to do it. But first of all, the responsibility is yours. Even in teaching Torah, the whole concept of having the community responsible for people to learn Torah is a novelty. It started in the end of the Second Temple. Yoshua ben Gamla was the first one to establish public schools, we could say, where people were taught on the funds of the community. Usually the teaching was from a father to a son. So that all creates a system of personal responsibility. Because of this, we sometimes say that that a well-run state, if you have a community that's run very well, it's a little bit contrary to Jewish thinking. If the community is running too well, and there's no responsibility on the individual, that is also not so good. The community has to know what not to put its hands into, like what not to touch, in order to foster personal responsibility. But the main thing is that I want to foster in people confidence. And I would very much, after the Torah is given, I very much want that to be active confidence. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu gives the Torah. Because of all the figures in the Tanakh, and all the seminal figures that we have, he's the best example of somebody who is actively confident in Hashem, and not just passively confident. It's very interesting. Aaron, even though he was in Egypt, and Moshe Rabbeinu thought that he was capable of redeeming the people also. But you have to say that Aaron, what did he do the whole time that he was the leader in Egypt? So he gave them passive confidence, but he wasn't able to also give them active confidence. And Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu specifically, this has to be done with active confidence, because to give the Torah, I can't show them an example of just passive confidence redeeming them. What is passive confidence? Passive confidence is the people who are able to lift people's spirits up and tell them in the end we'll be redeemed and so on. But they can't actually do something. Okay? They put in them the belief and the faith and the trust in Hashem, but that Hashem will do something. But they can't get up and do it themselves. You could say today we're in that same situation, that we have a lot of passive confidence and little active confidence when it comes to the redemption. And the Rebbe tried to change that around so that give an example that every person in his particular sphere can become actively confident in Hashem and do things that he doesn't think that he could do. So another one of the ways to define the difference between passive and active confidence is to say that passive confidence is the ability to not give up, whereas active confidence is the ability to conquer, okay, to go and do it yourself, to go and be able to change your situation yourself. And sometimes you can't, like we said, sometimes you have to exercise passive confidence. Okay? If there's something that's beyond your ability, so you have to not give up. You have to not give up that Hashem will save you. You have to not give up, not lose your hope, and not lose your optimism.
How can you say that to all of us in this room who all made Aliyah and came to Israel and whatever? I mean,
It says as a community, we're not able. We don't see that there's a person who's able to rally people around him to come and say we deserve more. That we didn't come to Eretz Yisrael just to buy another car. Okay? We didn't come to Eretz Yisrael so that every person can finish that sentence however they want. If you're content with what there is, it's fine. I'm not content with what there is.
Okay, so that would be passive
It's
confidence.
passive confidence right now because people are sort of like sitting and waiting.
Surviving.
Okay, surviving. We're not surviving. We're doing better than surviving physically,
Right.
but spiritually we're only surviving. There's no real demand for something more.
Well, everyone's waiting for Mashiach.
Okay, it's a passive wait, which might be okay. I don't know, because you can't force it. On the other hand, the Rebbe demanded that people demand it, even if you can't force it. But in the Rebbe's picture, it seems very clear that it's like we're hand wrestling with Hashem.
The Shluchim are actively not passive. They're active.
No, they're very active, but not about this issue of Mashiach. Okay, not in Eretz Yisrael anyway. Okay, in Eretz Yisrael, you can't sell this right now. If you sell it, you're a wacko.
Mashiach.
Yeah, it's like strange people. It doesn't make any sense right now because
Okay, but Mashiach aside, but the Shluchim out there in all the Chabad houses, that's active confidence, right?
they're doing very much. I said communally, we're not able to exercise active confidence. It's very hard for us. As a community, as all the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael, 6 million Jews,
Okay.
there's no active confidence in anything.
To get on the same page in any one thing. Okay.
Especially about what we call that we came here to change the world.
Okay.
And most, you have this in high tech. So they have some active confidence there. But it's not a community thing. High tech is still that a group of individuals get together and they say we can create a new product that nobody's created yet. It also requires active confidence, but it's not the active confidence of the community itself. When do you see some active confidence? Unfortunately, the only time you see it is during wars. But then it's still under the basis of survival. It doesn't come and say, we have something to sell to the world, right? Apart from, it used to be oranges and now it's Mobileye. Okay? We're not selling anything. We don't have anything to give you. We look at the world. Yeah, we have Mobileye. That's as far as the imagination goes. But to say that we have something that is a greater treasure than all the autonomous cars in the world, as a community, we don't know how to say that. We sort of, we'll go to our nice shir and we'll learn. And we might even heal ourselves. We might even feel better. But to come and say, this is what the entire world needs, we don't feel we have that.
We don't have courage to do it.
We don't have the courage, we don't have the people, we don't have anything.
So how can we say community? Because some of the community believes this and some of it doesn't.
That's part of it. That's part of it. There's no one person who's able to unify everybody around some cause. And the only ones that are able to unify us around any causes, in the end, are the Arabs. Maybe the Mashiach will be an Arab. According to this. But again, those are not real causes. Those are more survivability causes. Well, what?
Cut that out of the tape.
What? It says in the Gemara. It says in the Gemara it says that because we won't do tshuva in this sense, so Hashem will bring us a king whose decrees are as harsh as Haman's. It even says that Haman was able to do what all the prophets weren't able to do.
But he did it through hate.
But it unified everybody.
Justified.
It's not.
What did you
It's
do?
not. It's terrible that that's the only thing that
But
unifies.
it's unified, and that's legitimate, and Hashem will empower that and support it. I mean, I don't
If he
know.
empowers and supports it, I don't know. But he says it in the end. That's what causes unification. Is it lechatchila? No, it's not. Obviously, there's a different path.
Achashverosh giving his ring to Haman.
Yeah. The drop of one ring was able to do what all the prophets weren't able to do. The transfer of one ring. So in the end, that's why we say, Amelech, the king there, is really Hashem. And that's it. But everything that we're trying to do is to say that in the Torah there's a proactive approach, not a reactive approach. Okay? And that's exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu tried to teach. That here I have a proactive approach to connecting to Hashem. It's not only when you're drowning. You can connect to Hashem on a good day also. And not only can you connect to Him, but it's the active confidence that comes out of situations that seemingly are okay in and of themselves. You're in a good state. Egypt's behind us. We're finished with them. We're never going to see them again, and so on. What do we have left? So he says, now we came to the main course. The main course is Matan Torah, is receiving the Torah. And the Torah wants to teach you active confidence. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu gives it. Moshe Rabbeinu is always giving it. Like, in a certain sense, you say, why is Moshe stuck in the middle? Because without Moshe Rabbeinu as a symbol, as an individual who exercises active confidence, you might understand he's a hero. Okay? He's not afraid to confront Pharaoh. He's not afraid to fight him. He's not afraid to go out to war afterwards. He's willing to do everything. As such a person, and obviously his big thing is not going out to war. His big thing is education. As we say always, that Netzach is first of all chinuch. His education is okay. He's willing to stand, and if it's each one individually, so be it. Yitro adds his advice that maybe you don't need to talk to each one individually. But as far as Moshe Rabbeinu is concerned, it's each one individual. I'm gonna teach every single one exactly the way that he needs to be taught. I'm willing to spend the time to talk to 600,000 people.
That was the Rebbe.
Okay. So he's always the giver of the Torah, because the Torah has to be at its core, at its source, an understanding that you have to act yourself. You have to be active. You can't just rely on something else to do the work for you. And
Fine,
then,
but even back then, we had a hard time doing it as
Nachon? It's been the story since then.
It's not much
Because human nature is to run away from responsibility. It's much easier to have somebody else do it. It's much easier to go to passive confidence. Now, that's the regular story. The deeper story here is that who said that it's better to be active? Maybe since we want to foster in people trust in God, not in themselves, so maybe it's better to be passive and let Hashem do it. Maybe that teaches you more. Yeah. So, one of the things that happened in Chutz La'aretz after the destruction of the Second Temple was that there was an overriding feeling that what we came into exile for is to learn passive confidence. And it started from Nehemiah. Nehemiah was an advisor to the king of Babylon, and in Persia, sorry, and no, he's Babylon still, and the king tells him, "I want you to judge a case where the verdict will be life or death for the person who committed who's suspected of committing the act." So Nehemiah says, we're not allowed to. He says, since the temple was destroyed, our ability to impact the world this way has been taken away. It's part of our punishment. That we actively sought the wrong things, so Hashem took away the ability to act. What's the main thing? What's the main ability to act? To decide life and death. So Nehemiah says, I can't try this case. As much as I maybe have insight into it, I understand what's going on, but I can't try it for you. The king, please forgive me, because we're not allowed to. That's what he says to him. And from that moment on starts a state of passivity where Jewish people take a second chair approach to things. We can't decide what's going on because we decided incorrectly, and that's part of the consequences of what we did in the Second Temple. And because of that, now we have to be passive. And so you learn for a long time how to be passive. In fact, it says that the reason that we read about the 10 martyrs of the Roman Empire, meaning the Jews that were martyred by the Romans, on Yom Kippur, right after we read the Seder Avodah. Seder Avodah is that we reenact in words the temple service on Yom Kippur. And then we describe that all this is lost. And then we read the 10 martyrs. There's a question of why do we read them right afterwards? It just makes us more sad. So it says, no, this is actually uplifting, as strange as it sounds. Why? Because these 10 individuals, these 10 great sages, including Rabbi Akiva, who was the foundation of all Torah, they showed us the path of passive confidence. They're the examples of passive confidence. It's very interesting to say this about Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva, we know, is not just passive confidence. He was the big supporter of Bar Kochba. But in the end, it's almost seen as his accepting the verdict, meaning I tried one last time to use active confidence, and I saw that Hashem isn't with us with this. And so he as it were, he gives in, and he's willing to just be martyred by the Romans. And this is the path. This is like what it's saying. Since the temple was destroyed, don't try to exercise active confidence. And so, who are the ones who have active confidence in the exile? Very interesting. Who usually has active confidence when you look at it? Who are the people who end up fighting actively? There was a whole kingdom that did it, right? Referring to the Khazars. who were the people who actively fought, who didn't go into passive confidence. They wanted active confidence. That's why they came to Yiddishkeit. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
But obviously these were converts. The converts didn't come in with that feeling, because they just came in. What are you talking about? The whole Torah is active. They read it correctly. They say the whole Torah is active confidence. I didn't come into the Torah to be passive. And that's why they used to say to them, like the way you turn a convert away to see if they're serious was, know that the Jewish people are destitute and everybody walks over. There's no reason to join us, because that thing that you read in the Bible, it's not relevant right now. What do you read in the Bible? You read about these people who have strength in Hashem, who fight because they believe in Hashem.
Where in the Bible?
The entire Bible is that way.
Where?
Everything in the Bible is that way. You begin with Moshe Rabbeinu, who fights against Pharaoh, and you continue with Joshua, and you continue with every single one of the judges.
Where do you see that?
What?
Converts, at the converts.
Oh, so the main example is the Khazars, a whole kingdom that converted and became ferocious warriors. But there's also the Graf Pitotsky, and one of the most important ones was Shlomo Molcho. These were people who, when they converted, they said, I didn't come here, I didn't join to sit down. I joined to change the world. And so they confront the Pope, and like Shlomo Molcho, they're killed. But most of these people, they ended up burning themselves out because they couldn't take the exile, and they were right, because why did they come in? But they were warned, know that we're not in a position to exercise active confidence this way now. And that is the root of the entire argument today between people who come to decide that they want to set up a state and they want to become independent again, and the people who say, no, we don't have that, we don't have Hashem's agreement yet for that. That's the root of the. So the Rebbe found a way in the middle. What did he do? He said, you can't set up a state for the purpose of a state, but you can set something up, whatever kind of rule you want, in order to protect yourselves. And it's very interesting that in even as much as, and you said it beautifully, Shoshana, that they kept calling it defense. Right? It's called the Haganah. It's not called the Hatkafa.
You can't give up land because of defense.
It's
You need to
defense.
defend
But that's later. But
Yeah.
earlier, when they started with all the underground movements, so these were all defense. It was all to defend themselves. That's how the Rebbe explained it. That there's nothing that says, even though you can't go and conquer, but there's nothing that says that you can't defend yourself. Those are two different things. And to defend yourself, that's like passive confidence. Because I'm not coming and saying I have to claim my stake in the world. I'm just saying you have to let me live. I didn't do anything to you. So it's very interesting that the whole reality now in Eretz Yisrael is very much still in everything that we have is because of defense. And when it was outright to attack, it didn't hold out. It didn't work out. The main thing is 1956 with the Mivtza Kadesh, that they conquered the whole Sinai, and after a couple of months they gave it back without anything, because it was a completely active confidence act against the Egyptians, and it was very good. It worked very well, but they right away. So in a certain sense, they're still in this mode. As much as they wanted to do things actively, they ended up doing things very passively. It was very hard to change it. And in a certain sense, this is where the whole sugya, where the whole issue is today. Like, are we in a state already where a communal state where we're able to exercise active confidence, or are we not? And it's almost like everybody's waiting for a sign to see that somebody will be successful with active confidence, but on a whole people level, on a whole national level, not just on just an individual level.
Where's the rock with this?
So what he's trying to teach here is that this is the transition that the redemption creates. Meaning the redemption really is a change from passive confidence to active confidence with the knowledge that Hashem agrees with you. That he comes and says, yes, it's time now. But here's the big deal. That Reb Nachman, for instance, was very much into active confidence. A lot of his teachings are about this. Again, this has been going on since Chassidus started. In a certain sense, that's what the Baal Shem Tov came to teach. The whole teachings of the Baal Shem Tov were that we're now in a state that we can move from passive confidence to active confidence. However, and this is the main however, that, like we said, what's better, active or passive? Active seems to say self-reliance. And passive seems to say reliance on God. So which one's better? Obviously, religiously, reliance on God is better. So it says, really, you have to combine the two. You can't walk on one foot. Victory and acknowledgement are the 2 feet. That's a chenot. You can't walk with only one foot. Otherwise, you're skipping, you're hopping, which is pretty much what it feels like we're doing all the time. We're hopping, sort of in place. So you have to combine the two together. So says Reb Nachman, Mashiach will conquer the entire world without firing a single shot. What is that? If I tell somebody, a non-Jew now, I tell him, you're going to conquer the entire world, but you can't use an army. So he says, so what are you talking about? That's not, they can't conquer. But of course you can. Because I'm coming with the power of the infinite. I'm coming with Hashem. I'm relying on Hashem. Except that my reliance in Hashem has to translate into active involvement, into active, proactive acts and actions that I do. But they don't involve subjugating somebody. They involve a feeling that these people, what they're doing and what they're saying and how they're acting and everything that they're, for lack of a better word, they're marketing to the rest of the world is conquering. It's like something that grabs you and says, wait a minute, there's a better way to live. There's a better way to be a human being, and it's infinitely better. And so you're conquered by it in a certain sense. Your mind is conquered by it, but it doesn't come to conquer the world in the sense of subjecting somebody to it. Because that would be just the false form of active confidence that doesn't involve godliness in it. So you have to find how to do this. And that's where it gets really complex. So the picture that the Arabs are selling, for instance, that the Jews want to conquer the entire Middle East. So they're right, but they're completely wrong. because we can't even bring ourselves right now to even think about doing something actively. All the more so that when we do, the whole direction is one of something much more spiritual, of something that includes godliness in it. And obviously, before Hashem, everybody are His creatures. So there's no difference at that level, and it has to bring peace to everybody. It can't be something that just works for some people, doesn't work for others. But without getting into criticism, certainly one of the shortcomings of this current arrangement that we have here, that we call the State of Israel, is that it encapsulates the whole Jewish existence as something very militant. So yes, it's a transfer to active confidence, but it's completely in the wrong way. The truth is that to survive in this neighborhood, you have to be really strong, and you have to be very defensive. But you can't be proactive in the sense that well, I'll just go and conquer now whatever I can. That doesn't fit perfectly. It doesn't fit correctly with what it means to have passive confidence. To say it another way, that going out to exile and being in passive confidence is not entirely a state that has to be now forgotten. On the contrary, like the Rebbe says, you take the Golah, you take the exile itself, and you add an aleph to it, and it becomes the redemption, the Geula. I'm not giving up everything that was. One of the best examples, and we'll get to it in a moment, is Chanukah. That Chanukah originally, in the land of Israel, after, again, in the year 180 BCE, when the Chashmonaim finished and they decided this would be the mitzvah, they light candles. So of course they lit the candles outside your home, like the Gemara says. But then, in exile, especially in Babylon, it became impossible to do it because of the Zoroastrian religion. They didn't allow anybody to light candles outside at night, and did only for their religion. So there was a necessity to bring it into the home. So one approach is, if I've been forced to bring it into the home, that's only temporary. But the first moment I get, I'll take it back out. But by most people, that's not. By most people, I can't say if it's most or less than most. But certainly, the Rebbe's thinking is that no, we don't give up what we earned the hard way. Meaning, it wasn't so easy. It wasn't that they were very nice. They knocked on people's doors and they came and said, "You can't have your candles out here." That's not that's not how the world worked in the year 200 CE. They probably killed people, and so as a result, right? And Jews were very stubborn, so they probably tried anyway. And more who killed them. The whole story. So eventually, they were forced to bring it in. It was coercion. It wasn't just it doesn't work with the city bylaws. Okay. So when you gain something the hard way, you don't give it up so easily. If you understand what you went through to gain this type of understanding, you don't throw it out just because, well, now I'm in a different place. No, I gained something from it. Same way that the hardships that a person went through in his life. He doesn't come and say, okay, now I'll forget them all. Now I'm in a good place. So whatever I went through before that was difficult, and if I had a hard childhood or whatever, I'll just forget that and continue on. You don't do that. Because there's a lot that you gain from it. So in a certain sense, you continue to carry it with you. And especially the way you learned from it. So in that sense, you take the exile with you. You turn the exile into the redemption. Obviously, you need to add a new ingredient. There's an ingredient that's missing in the exile. And that ingredient is active confidence. But it becomes a unification of the passive with the active. So you could say that internally you're passive and externally you're active, or maybe the other way around. So what we want to do now is to look at Chanukah as an example of what it means to be both passive and active at the same time. So the beautiful example is that there's a dispute about how you light the Chanukah candles. Do you light them by adding one every night, or do you light them by subtracting one every night? So Beis Hillel says you start from 1 and you go to 8. And Beis Shammai says you start from 8 and you go down to 1. What's the difference? So let's think about somebody who finished the war. He was a Hashmonean commander, and he finished the war. And this is related to our parsha also, because our parsha begins with the lighting of the menorah. So they come into the Beis Hamikdash and they light the menorah, and then they see that they only have enough oil for one day. And yet it continues for another 7 days. What good was it for that generation? What what did it show? What did it do for that generation? If you get into their mindset, what did it do for them? When you're a soldier, you can't think, Hashem will take care of my enemy. The whole, I mean, maybe you're shell-shocked and then you can't do anything. But if you're functioning, and most soldiers do function, the feeling is it's all on me. And the adrenaline is pumping hard, and there's no feeling here, normally, that I can just look aside and, my enemy's just going to run away or fall down. I got to do the work myself. And so when you come out of war, you're completely, absolutely entrenched in active confidence. And it's so strong that the Torah comes and says, I can't right away expect you to be able to conquer your Yetzer Hara even. You're so full of yourself, because that's how it works. You're so dependent only on yourself. Obviously, you believe in Hashem and so on. But that's if you're being shelled. But if you're fighting, if you're actually in hand-to-hand combat or face-to-face or in a tank or whatever it is, you have to feel yourself. So you move into active confidence, and you're in that very strongly, to the point where we have later on this whole idea of Eshet Fatah. That the Torah says I can't expect a soldier who came out of combat just now to conquer his physical needs. It can't. You don't do it that way. In fact, where do we feel this? Regular people like us in 2019. When you get off the highway and you have to merge into regular traffic, right? Because when you're on the highway, you're going as fast as you want, basically. And now suddenly, if you merge straight into the city traffic, whoa, it's a big switch in your head. From having a tremendous amount of power, you have to become defensive. You have to drive defensively again. You have to go back into pulling, and it's a very hard switch to do. And there's a lot of accidents that happen because the person getting off the highway and trying to merge into regular city traffic just overestimates their abilities. And it's not that way. Or when a person's drunk or whatever, it's also.
So how long does the soldier have before the expectations switch?
So came Hashem and made a miracle. What's the miracle? He wants to show you. He wants to slowly get you used to the fact that it was He who fought for you. How does He do that? He shows you an ongoing miracle to convince you slowly that it was He who fought for you. It was He who gave you the strength to fight. You can't do it, you can't feel that when you're fighting. But you can certainly feel that, and it's sort of like the thing that you have to go through to get back into normal human society, is to feel that this wasn't me who fought back there. In fact, I would argue that this would probably be the most important thing for soldiers to do, especially if they feel any kind of guilt or any kind of feelings of how could I have taken life. If they have, most people don't have those problems, but some people do. They don't fully believe in what they did. So what you did, Hashem did. It wasn't you. It's much greater than you. When a person doesn't believe that he had to defend himself, or he had to fight, actually fight, actively even, because Hashem commanded him to, so they can come away with a very torn reality and have a lot of moral issues with themselves.
So how does God do this?
So that was the miracle of the menorah that occurred right after they started resting. They finished fighting on Kaf Daled, and then, or Chanu Kafeh, there's two different opinions. In any case, Kafeh is a question, and that's this transition from active confidence into passive confidence. And passive confidence really says that Hashem did all this. It wasn't me. So they have these 8 days or 7 days, depending on how you count it, that they're quieting down. So really it's two pictures of what Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai are saying, is that there's two pictures here. One is that the light lessens every day. So it's like sort of telling you, calm down, relax, take it easier and easier, until you feel that it's really Hashem doing this. Or there's another way of looking at it, which is you have to feel Hashem doing more and more. So that's Beis Hillel's point of view, that the miracle like increases from day to day. Obviously, to transfer a person from self-reliance to a state of relying on Hashem, it's Beis Hillel's opinion is better. That you see Hashem's involvement more and more with every day that passes. So you see the miracle becoming stronger and stronger every day. And so you begin to understand, wait a minute, everything that I experienced during this war was really Hashem's involvement. So this is like sort of something that you have to do after every project comes to a culmination. After everything that you actively, it's sort of like, if you came to Eretz Yisrael, and it had to be a tremendous task. It had to involve incredible shifts and demanded a tremendous amount from you. But as you get used to it, the feeling has to become more and more that I didn't do this. Hashem did this. All the more so if you're a convert, because we said that the convert comes with a feeling that he has to be very active. I came here to join an active people. I didn't come here to that. But as time goes, you have to become used to the fact that this was meant to be. Hashem did all this. I didn't do any of this. This is just how it is. This flows normally and naturally out of it. Nobody can tell, and that's why you don't remind a convert of his previous name. This was always this way. You were always anyway Jewish. Except you didn't know. Said, okay, so Hashem made it, or He made it, and slowly you slipped into this new reality, and now everything's fine. Obviously, that's not how you feel the day before you go to a Beis Din. You feel that the world's about to end, and you have to fight it in order to make the leap. It's a tremendous leap. And it requires incredible strength, and it requires incredible endurance to go through the process. And all that's going to come from you. No, Hashem's not going to give it to you. But once it's over, you have to learn how to slowly let things be more natural. So in that sense, passive confidence is also about reinterpreting the past. That everything that happened because Hashem made it happen the way He did. It was a miracle. It was all a miracle. The Chashmonaim would have said, Hashem's going to fight for us and we're going to sit by and look at what's going on. Nothing would have happened. There would have been no second temple, really. It would have been cut down in its infancy after 100 years of it was just a very small building back then. And perhaps even Torah Shabbal Peh would not have been developed the way that it did. Because it needed that cradle of the Hashmonaean kingdom for as little as it lasted, but it provided something that was needed. So you have to fight, but once you're finished, it has to feel like slowly you get into the understanding that, wait a minute, this is something Hashem did. Now we're in the opposite direction. So that's why it says that in the future we'll paskin like Beis Shammai. In the future, the feeling will be the opposite. That you start with feeling Hashem does everything, a lot of light, and you go and diminish it slowly to the point where you can take over, as it were. On the last day, there's only one little candle left. It says, where's the rest of the light going to come from? From you. It's dependent on you.
You know, I thought this was what Havdalah was.
Okay.
That we have to let go and make a space for Hashem, let go of all our preconceived ideas.
That's the emunah, not the bitachon.
Okay, so but is that active or passive?
So we said emunah is a little bit like passive, but it's not confidence yet.
Okay.
It's not trust. It's just Hashem is everything. There's nothing to be done here. In passive, there's a lot to be done. I have to survive. And I have to be defensive. I have to hold my ground. I have to not give in. And there's a lot that I need to do. It's not okay if I don't do anything, even if
still
what I
called
do is
passive.
just to hold on. What?
But that's still called passive. It sounds
But
like
that's
you're doing a
confidence
lot.
still, because I'm doing something.
Okay, this is
Emuna is, there's nothing to be done here. Everything's good. It's all good, man. Like, nothing to do. It's good as it is.
Okay.
That's Emuna. Now we're in Bitachon.
Okay.
So this switch, and that's why it says that the Beis Shammai, they're Gvura. They're might. Because what are they teaching you? They're teaching you to exercise. They're moving you from left to right. The movement of Gvura is from left to right. The movement of Chesed is from right to left. So Beis Hillel, they're Chesed. They're moving you towards Hod. They're moving you towards acknowledgement, towards passive confidence. And Beis Shammai, which will paskin like in the future, is the reverse movement. But again, it's a process. What can you take over? It's like Hashem telling you, what can you take over and not lose your feeling that it's me doing it all, but I want you to do more and more. To the point where, when the third temple is built, it'll be on the one hand human beings building it, on the other hand, the feeling that these people will have is that it's entirely coming down from heaven. So that's the movement from left to right, from passive confidence to active confidence. That our actions become a manifestation of our passive confidence. And if it's done correctly, that's in the you can't. If you don't do it with Torah, then what happens is that you try to move. Again, nobody argues that somehow the Jewish people in exile were not passive. Everybody understands this. It's a very simple thing. To suddenly require you to sort of get off the ship and take a gun and start fighting, that's a very harsh movement from left to right. And it doesn't leave you in a good place, because you have to completely divorce yourself from faith in Hashem, from passive confidence. It says that Hashem helps me, that Hashem was the one who was giving me the strength. So it's a very harsh switch. Instead, it has to be like Beis Shammai are describing, that you slip into it. You go from Gvura to Netzach. That's the movement, from left to right. That movement from left to right, okay, from Netzach, what's Gvura, which is up here, to Netzach, that's down there. Okay.
Which is more gradual,
Okay, it's more gradual.
It's a softer flow.
For homework, I'll let you find out what letter is related to that channel. Right? Between all the different sfirot, there are channels. And each channel has a letter. So there's one particular letter, so that's for homework.
Are we supposed to figure it out, or?
No, you can do some research on the internet, you'll find it.
In the Aleph Facebook, is that where it is?
It is
No.
not in the Aleph Facebook, but it's on the site.
I think Rav Trugman did that.
I think it's on the site. Okay, you probably do.
I think an Arya
Your
can
notes.
find one of these books of probably have it.
Of course, somewhere.
In any case, it's one of the 12 simple letters. So you just have to figure out which one. Okay, in any case, this description is what's called that you come out of exile with mercy, with compassion. Yeah, what Rashbi said. Rashbi didn't agree with his Rebbe, with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva wanted to try one more time with Bar Kochba. And Rashbi didn't agree with him. And he said, no. My way is through Torah.
It's passive.
And he's more he's Hod. He's the master of it. But the mistake would be to say that he's only passive, because he's not passive at all. He wants to come very much to active confidence. But he says the path to active confidence, now let's look at it a little bit, make it a little bit more complex. Who's affecting this move from Gvura to Netzach? Who's right underneath it? Hod. Hod itself is controlling this movement. That's what Rashbi says. And when you move this way, you pass through Rachamim. You pass through Tiferet in the middle. When you go from Yira, from Gvura, to Netzach, you have to pass Rachamim in the middle. Whereas if you go from Gvura directly to Chesed, straight to the right axis, like to be active, like Avram is active. So then you don't pass through, you don't collect $200, you don't go through Go, you don't go through Tiferet. But what Rashbi says about the Zohar is B'sifada yafkun min galuta berachme, that with this book you'll come out of the exile with compassion. So what does it mean with compassion? That this allows you to pass through Tiferet. Tiferet is compassion, it's rachamim. And he says that's much better than the other options, because Rabbi Akiva just wanted to switch completely. Let's go from left to right, and whatever happens, happens. He says, no, you need a gradual movement, like Beis Shammai. And that gradual movement, it's not, I'm using the word gradual, but it doesn't have to be gradual. It can be very, very quickly, 8 days. That's all you need. You need 8 days to make this switch. It's an incredible thing. It's just like a child is born, and 8 days later he becomes the soul. This same transition can happen in 8 days. But psychologically speaking, there's a transition here that's occurring. So you can translate this into any situation where a person has to move from being passive to being active. And you have to see that it's a process. Like for instance, simplest thing in the world maybe, you want to educate your children about handling money. So you do it slowly, right? At first you give them responsibility for 5 shekels a week. Then it's for 10 shekels for 2 weeks, 15 shekels for 3 weeks, 20. You don't right away move the person and say, you have to be responsible for everything at this moment. Because it's too much. It doesn't know how to handle it. It has to be, in that sense, time dilated. Like you have to graduate it in some way, gradually, over time. So really, maybe 8 days is enough for the whole thing. But depending on the age of the child, it might take longer. So we do it maybe in terms of weeks, whatever it is. In that sense, that's exactly what we did what we just did in order to receive the Torah. We moved over, instead of 7 days, again we said that there's a question about the first day. Was Kafei the day that they rested on, or was it the first day that they lit the menorah again? So in the end it's probably both. So really you had 7 days where they made the switch from being very actively confident to becoming, to call it sublimating their experiences in the war and beginning to understand that really Hashem did all this. So in the same way, when we moved out of Egypt, we were very passive and came to Har Sinai, we had to go through 7 weeks of the opposite process of going from being passive to becoming active, to being able to receive the Torah. Okay. So now, you said you wanted to hear something from what the Rav spoke about on Thursday. So there's a lot of things that he said. The thing that wowed me, the first thing that wowed me was something very simple. I think we've said it before, but it's how he said it on Thursday that really struck me. He said, when you talk about Torah and science, and you think about what does Torah have to contribute to science? What does Torah have? We know that science has a lot to contribute to Torah. But what exactly can Torah contribute to science? So there's many things that Torah can contribute by giving science some direction. So science is going in different directions now. It's trying to do this, trying to do that. The main thing the Torah has to add to it is you have to search for unity in everything that you're looking for. Because why? Because Hashem is one. So Einstein was onto the right thing. He had the right idea. You have to unify in his world the two nuclear forces in electromagnetism with gravity. You have to unify it. That's the right way to go. Keep looking for more unification. Meaning, you have enough information. You can always break things apart more. You can always resolve further. But the real breakthroughs are going to happen when you unify, when you begin to unify things. So, that's an easy one. But there are areas, or is there an area of knowledge where Torah really has something to innovate in science, not just to give direction, but to actually innovate something new that you couldn't come to any other way. That, in fact, science should be researching all kinds of conclusions that it came to from Torah, not the other way around. So the thing he said is that, and this is actually also part of the first mimer in today's Likutei Torah, what sets Torah apart from everything else? He gave a beautiful example. He said, who is the master of Torah knowledge versus scientific knowledge? Who received wisdom? So we always say this, Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, who's the wisest man of all men. What made him wiser than everybody else? The fact that he also had Torah wisdom, not just other wisdoms. Other wisdoms he learned, and he knew them from other people, from all the other nations of the world that he married and came to know. But he was wiser than everybody else. There was one wisdom that nobody else had. He had it more than everybody else. And he innovated in it in a way that nobody could innovate. What was that? So it says, you see it in the first story about him, right? After he dreams this dream in Givon. And Hashem asks him, what do you want? I'll give you whatever you want. He says, I want wisdom. And Hashem says, because you asked for wisdom, not for wealth, I'll give you both wealth and wisdom. So he comes back to Yerushalayim, and he's a 12-year-old kid. And the first thing we're told is that he now faces this trial, or this situation between two women who both gave birth, and one child died, and one child's alive. And so something very simple is, how did he know to do what he did? Or if you want to ask it in a way that would spark somebody, you say, maybe even anger them a little, is what Siman in Shulchan Aruch did he read where it says that if you have to decide who a child belongs to, you say cut him in half? Where in the Shulchan Aruch does it say that? It doesn't say that anyway. What blot of Gemara does it say that that's how you do it? In fact, when you think about it, that's not even considered holding or doing justice according to Torah. Because even in Torah, you have to prove something. You have to show, you have to show me that this child belongs to you and not to me and not to the other woman. You have to give me evidence. Torah works on evidence. That's how Torah law also works. It's no different. So where did he know how to do this? That's the wisdom that Hashem gave him. So how would you categorize this type of wisdom? He said, and that's what struck me, psychology. It's to understand people's psychology. And so this type of wisdom, this is the additional wisdom that the Torah has. More than any other type of wisdom, this is, you can completely get it from the Torah, and it's entirely better than anything that you would develop in any other way. And so this has to be something that affects, meaning that when it comes to psychology, you don't need to rely at all on the other theories. They're all theories. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. They work to some extent. It's not that they don't work at all. You respect them. But when it comes to what type of Torah can become science, and what can elevate science of psychology to the level of science that would actually be something that you could measure and quantify and study the way, and apart from running rats through a maze, but to do something really productive would be to start from Torah, the way that we do. And so when you think about, can Torah inform humanity about something that you can't get by using the empirical method on nature? Yes. This is the one area that's most important to develop. And so it becomes that this, if you talk about what can we sell, what can I market to the rest of the world, in that sense, what we're doing here is probably the most important. Because it really gives true insight into human nature, into social nature of human beings, and how to really heal. That's why it says that Mashiach will first of all be a healer. In that sense, he will be a psychologist. Whereas my 8-year-old says he will be a psycholog, because he can't say psycholog. He'll be a psycholog. He won't be a psycholog, he'll be a psycholog. He'll be a kaisologist.
Where in, I missed one sentence, where in the Shulchan Aruch did Shlomo know to look? So how did he?
That was the wisdom that came from above.
That was the wisdom.
That's the wisdom of the Torah in the sense of what Hashem gave us, like Torah Chadashah, like new Torah, new interpretation. Obviously, late milta de lo remiza be'oraita. Everything is hinted to in the Torah somewhere. So even what Shlomo knew, he knew from somewhere in Chumash. The question is where? Where does it say something like that? That's also homework. I don't know what the answer is. But there has to be. Meaning, at some level, he learned it from a pasuk in Chumash. So it would be a good...
This particular case, what
So this was some more about active and passive confidence. Let's just say one last thing. I don't know, what time is it?
It's 5:02.
Okay, so I have 5 more minutes. When all of this is described in Chassidus related to, in the future, a woman will give birth every day. It's a metaphor. Will it be a reality? I hope. I don't know. But at least it's a metaphor. So what is it a metaphor for? That it says when a woman gives birth, she gives birth to a male. Isha ki tazriya v'yalda zachar. That if the awakening comes from below, that's what it means that a woman gives birth. And it's a feminine awakening from below, it gives birth to a male. And it says that in the future, ish ve'ish yulad ba. That in Zion it will be that a man and a man are given birth to, are born. And in the same Maimarim that the rabbis discussed this whole thing of Ishaki Tazrev and Dazachar, they also ask the question, why does it say Ish ve'ish yulad ba? It should say Ish ve'isha yulad ba. It should say that a male and a female will be born. Why do you say that? Not everybody who's born is a male. So the answer is no, then in future, because it will be an awakening from below, that everything that will be born will be male, even if it's female. Okay. What does it mean? So they explain. It means that if somebody is feminine, it means that they're more of a receiver, more of a mekabel. And if they're male, masculine, not male, but masculine, they're more of an influencer, they're a mashpia. So he says, really the difference between passive and active confidence is whether you're passive in the sense that you're waiting to receive, or whether you're active in the sense that you influence. that you don't wait. So it says that then in future, everything will be an awakening from below, such that everybody that will be born will be masculine. They will only influence. They'll only be mashpi'im. Even the women will be mashpi'ot. That you can't remain. So in a certain sense, it's being awakened by the feminine, by the passive, but the result is that it's completely active. Right? Because you have so much faith in Hashem, that's the feminine side of Hod, that Hashem, I trust Hashem. But not that I'm waiting for Him to do, but rather I'll give birth, and what I give birth to is to constantly be active, constantly be influenced, to constantly influence others. And that was the main thing that the Rebbe tried to teach people. He said it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, and it doesn't matter if your strength is in faith, that you have faith in Hashem, passive confidence. You have to switch to becoming, you have to give birth to a masculine inside yourself, or outside yourself, whatever it is. And so even things that you think are passive have to be transformed into something active. And to be active means to influence. And it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, it's all the same. In that sense, everybody's equal. And they have to be. No,
Why does it say that the woman will rise above the man?
okay, that's the idea. That because if you start with active, you end up with passive. So the woman, she's higher in this sense, or the feminine is higher in this sense, because it gives birth now to the active, to the ability to influence. In other words, you have to start with passive confidence. You have to have a tremendous amount of passive confidence. You have to be feminine in some level before you become active. But you have to move to becoming active. You have to give birth to a male. And everything that you do has to be something that propagates, that does more. That's the interpretation that was given to it in Chabad.
And did you say the future is today?
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously. In general, we'll see this when we come to Rabbi Akiva and Nachum Ish Gamzu, the difference between them. And Nachum was entirely in the time of the temple still. And Rabbi Akiva was already after the destruction. So Nachum has completely active confidence in Hashem, even in situations where it seems that he's sort of passive, but he's still active, and he pushes for reality to change. Active means that I can change reality. Passive says I can't, I can just hold my ground, but I can't change reality. And so then we'll see that this has a lot to do with Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. That in Eretz Yisrael, when you come back to Eretz Yisrael, it's really a movement back into active confidence. So, however you ended up here, it doesn't really matter. Again, some people they came 100 years ago, some people have been here for 500 years, some people have been here 2 days ago. It doesn't matter. The movement to Eretz Yisrael is a movement towards active confidence again. But again, the secret is that you have to take the passive confidence, and it has to become what gives birth to the active confidence. It can't just be that you just work actively. Just active by itself, again, will make you feel just a kochi v'otzim yadi. Just the whole issue of Eretz Yisrael is to rectify what it means to have confidence in yourself. So that's why they also came from Egypt. And again, if we go back to what we start with, Avram asked, "B'ma yedaki Roshena? How will I conquer? How will I inherit this land?" So he says, if you want to inherit this land, you have to start off by being bonded in Egypt for 400 years. You have to be passive before, and then you take that passive confidence and you turn it into something active. That's the whole story of the Chumash. The Chumash is Avram in the third parsha, And he says, how will I know, in the fourth parsha, he says, how will I know that I will inherit this land? And then you go through the entire cycle until they come to enter Eretz Yisrael. What did they learn on the way? They learned how to be passive, how to have passive confidence in Hashem. They went through an exile. And so you needed an exile in order, because otherwise, when you come into the land, when you come into your own, you'll be saying, this is all me. In the end, this is this level of human development. There's many levels after that. We don't know what they will. We know partially what they'll be like. But the level right now is, when will the world be redeemed? When a person learns how to do everything himself and still feel Hashem did this all. That's the level we're looking for now. And to do it in such a way that it's not just at the individual level, it's the communal level, and everything works in this way that the left flows into the right. That's why we always say that when men, this is wrong, but in a garment, it's very interesting that women's garments all work this way. The right goes over the left.
You have to change the buttons on orders.
The left is on the inside, and the right is on the outside. So outwardly it's like confidence, but on the inside it's all passive. It's very interesting that by women it's the opposite, right? Sorry, by men's garments, this is a woman's garment. It's not a man's garment. Except I think that all coats are this way, even by men. No? In a regular suit. Oh, you're right. In a regular suit, I don't remember anymore. In a regular suit, the left goes over the right by men.
All men's clothes.
It's very strange where they got this even from. Somebody has to once research this whole thing, where it came from. You were saying?
In my daughter's a dancer, and we've discussed this over the years, and I mean, we're learning, Hodnaz giving it over to her, and she said it's interesting that all the Netzach is stepping forward, but it's being held by Hod.
Right.
It's the Hod that's supporting the Netzach to go right down. It's like, wow, it's what she's saying, that the foundation is the passive confidence, which allows the active confidence to move ahead.
Say them.